The first question that would be interesting to learn more about is just your background, like who you tend to work with, your role, responsibilities, anything you feel relevant.
Sure. I've been doing digital marketing for about 18 years. I got started originally on the paid search side, and through my roles at other agencies got exposed to search engine optimization. And I was sort of drawn more to that side of digital marketing. I spent a few years at Razorfish managing their SEO practice. I spent a couple years at NBC after that. And then ultimately wanted to try to build something on my own. About 6.5 years ago, a good friend of mine, also from Razorfish, both of us started Moving Traffic Media. I'm the co-founder. We call ourselves managing partners. And my role there is everything from business development to the primary SEO lead on some more of our complicated or more technical, challenging clients. We're a team of about 10, roughly split half and half between paid search and SEO. We work with medium-sized businesses. We have enterprise level capabilities, but our sweet spot is sort of in that middle market. And we're agnostic from a vertical perspective, but we tend to skew a bit more toward regulated industries. So think about that as like healthcare, real estate, finance. There's some B2B mix in there as well, where we work with companies powering the engines that sort of run a lot of these AI models. So that's been sort of a fun client to work on as we're sort of, learning and applying AI methodology to a lot of what we're doing.
That makes sense. Okay, could you talk a bit more about the last time you did it and maybe what steps did you take to help your business your client grow from A to B, basically?
I think we're finding the best application for AI, at least as of today, is the speed at which we can get recommendations submitted and published. A good example is an e-commerce client we work with. Multiple times a year, they roll out a brand new set of products. And there's a number of steps that go into that. As part of our SEO initiative, we're tasked with creating custom descriptions for hundreds of products every time they're released. And a lot of times we're not given, the tangible product to sort of like touch and feel and create a description based on that. So we're left with specific product attributes or maybe a gender that it's assigned to. And so what we've started to do is use a custom GPT front loaded with all of the brand guidelines, nomenclature, things not to say, or like terms to avoid. And then we use this a concatenation between here's all the attributes we know about the product, fabrics that are used, gender, personas that piece of clothing might target. And then we use a chat GPT to sort of understand all of those attributes, layer in the brand guidelines, and then the output is the description. Something that would take us hours previously, we can get a first draft in maybe 15 minutes based on our knowledge of the product and the client and multiple rounds of revisions over the past 3-4 years. We can then go through each one of those individual product descriptions and say, okay, we need to edit this. This reads very AI-like. We want to revise that. But it's really that first draft, the speed to that first draft that changes everything. It allows us to get those descriptions to the client for review much faster. There's no delays in their product launches. It streamlines the entire process. On top of that, we can build in the SEO fields that we would want to layer into that product as well. So if we want a custom title or a custom meta description, rather than relying on, as typical with e-commerce where they're just pulling in a dynamic title tag based on the product name. If that product name isn't well optimized, then we can also build in recommended title tags and meta descriptions using ChatGPT as they're creating product description. We basically have all of our custom fields ready for review, and it just becomes an exercise of getting those published. Most CMS platforms have an easy sort of upload capability. So everything's with working within the same sort of upload friendly CSV file. And so we can get everything from initial receipt of the product list to creation and editing to actual upload in a matter of hours compared to maybe days in the past. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really where we're seeing just massive use cases across the spectrum for a lot of what we're doing.
Makes sense. It's like, I guess this is just the beginning. And
It really is.
what's the most difficult in that process?
The most difficult, I think, is managing for hallucinations where they're just sort of making up something if they're unsure and not taking the initial output as the final. Companies, freelancers, even agencies are making where they just assume the output is good to go
Mhm.
and just doing a quick copy and paste. I think there is still very much needed a layer of manual review as part of that entire process. So there is still a layer of human capital needed in that process. And then the other thing is just through the upload, making sure there are no errors, making sure all the columns are still porting into the right fields in the CMS. I think that's where AI has the opportunity to continue to evolve. And maybe agents is part of that, where you can have the agent take the file, upload it, do the QA. So you're removing that component and relying on an AI agent to do that in the future. It's exciting times, but also complicated in terms of making
Yeah.
sure everything is done correctly and there's no errors.
Yeah. And then one pivot by next AI release could also wipe some of that efforts to
Exactly. Exactly.
fun times. If you had unlimited resources like time, money, people, what would you do or change?
Hmm. I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. There's been a lot of news around DeepSeek where it's a lightweight model. You can basically run on your own home machine. And I've been thinking about, is there a way to create a DeepSeek variant for each client? So imagine you're training this LLM on all the specifics about an individual client. And then you basically have a X client LLM, B client LLM, anything you need to create, whether it's an SEO optimized attribute, like a title tag, long form content, or editing a piece of content you receive from them. That LLM is trained on everything about that company, products, attributes, the way they talk about things. Then there's this layer of the digital side that we would do. So, all the best practices for optimizations, how to vectorize content, determine cosine similarity, apply that to the output of the recommendation, right? So you have these individual customer LLMs that you can basically work within, do all the work, have all the training behind it around how to talk about a certain thing, but having that SEO layer on top of it. But you start to interact directly with these LLMs versus having to go to ChatGPT and prime it with things. Not to say a good example is like, you are an SEO expert. My ChatGPT knows that's the language they should be talking in. But instead of going to ChatGPT for all of these, you're sort of working with a completely custom trained model that's just running on your home machine or maybe a company server,
Mm.
and everything is private. And
On-prem, for sure. That makes a lot of sense.
yeah. And so everything is perfectly aligned with the way that your customer talks about everything that they do. I think that right now is hard to get from even a custom GPT because you can only upload so much information.
Mhm.
And there's risks with what you can share versus not, especially in the industries that we work in around finance and health. But if you have all that contained in your own custom model, there's mitigated risk with what you can and can't upload because it's all centralized in one place. You're not sharing it externally. I think that's really where it would be fun to spend some effort to try to build out and see what the results are.
Yeah, for sure. It's like proper agent territory.
Exactly.
What do you see is missing in the tools for this SEO AI combined growth, or like SEO with AI integrated to help with organic growth? Like what's missing in the tools currently? What do you think?
I don't know if it's missing per se, but I think it has to be prompted correctly to pull in, right? So like ChatGPT, for example, has probably all the expertise to do or output whatever you need. but if the prompt isn't executed correctly, you may not get the full output or the most comprehensive response. I think the other thing about ChatGPT that's still challenging is to say, I need an article on X and it spit out a full article that doesn't need some heavy editing. So it's things like that where I think there's a mismatch between what the tools could do and what the future might bring. But that would be the mismatch I would be thinking about. I feel like you almost need a chain of prompts to really get to exactly what you need. And oftentimes it's, no, my client doesn't want to say something like that. You need to avoid using the word accident, for example, for an insurance client. It needs to say mishap or insurance incident or something
Mhm.
less egregious like accident or death. Like they don't want to put that in an article.
Yeah.
So I think it's things like that where if you had a external LLM trained holistically on that vertical or client, it would just know not to do that because it's been trained on that. And
Yeah.
so it wouldn't be something you'd have to prompt every time.
Makes
So
sense.
that
Goes beyond shallow implementation. That's for sure. Well, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, the part of open-ended questions is over.